So that's lit. And now it is time to get into the show. And we're going to start tonight with political update. Political talk is the best there is, and we're going to do it. So, with that, what's up with the Iowa caucus? So, Pete Buttigieg, I think, and Bernie Sanders are all but tied, with the former maintaining a 0.1% lead in the voting and an even number of delegates. And it's not much competition from anybody else. Elizabeth Warren's got 18% compared to the forerunners 26.2 and 26.1%. And Biden is surprisingly trailing at only 15.8% of voters and a mere 2 delegates compared to the 11 shared by Bernie and Pete and 5 held by Warren. So that's kind of shocking. Biden kind of went into this as the favorite, and to see him struggle like this is unusual. But I think the question on everyone's mind is, why is it taking so long for these results to come in? Now, if only I knew, but I do have a theory. If this endeavor was in any part a public effort, then we're doubtlessly employing the best technology we were able to nab from crashed Russian satellites from the Cold War. So, with that in mind, let's give them some patience. They're probably trying to figure out how to translate that into a modern programming language just so they can put it on Google. And so now, I think it is time, in week 5 of the Carlton term, and the third episode of the show, it is time for the Insomniac Variety Hour to name its official endorsement for President of the United States. And after hours of consulting with our writing team, we've decided to endorse Bernie Sanders. Now, this is for a number of reasons. I enjoy his stance on climate change and what needs to be done about it. I think it's probably the most important issue, and really, compared to the others, one of the only things that matters going into the 2020 election. However, he's also a pretty strong guy, and one of the only living human beings who went through the 2016 election in the United States and thought, yeah, you know what, let's do that again. So, it's Bernie all day, feeling the burn. So, yeah, go Bernie, and let's keep up the good work, I guess. So, hopefully those votes come in soon, and Bernie can make up the difference with Buttigieg. And while we're talking about politics, I'd like to talk about Joe Biden and a Business Insider article about him that I read and thought was quite interesting. So the author of the article in question is Ben Gilbert. He works at Business Insider as their tech and games correspondent. So it's kind of a stretch for him to be covering politics, but I guess they need to pump out articles, so it's whatever. So in this article, we've got a few interesting quotes. My two favorites were Democratic presidential candidate and former Vice President Joe Biden is no fan of video game creators, apparently. And bizarrely, Biden wasn't answering a question about video games. And in 2012, when he was serving as vice president under Barack Obama, Biden met with Silicon Valley leaders, including Apple CEO Tim Cook, Netflix CEO Reed Hastings, and at least 2 prominent video game executives, former EA CEO John Riccitiello and Zynga chairman Mark Pincus. Now, the meat and potatoes of the situation is that the article was about how Biden called some individual he met at a meeting a creep, and, our boy Ben just kind of applied it to everyone in Silicon Valley. So, it wasn't even the meeting that he's talking about, or it isn't necessarily the meeting that Ben is talking about in this article. So, it's implied that it was this meeting by another organization which responded to a New York Times article, which wasn't even an article, it was just a published interview with Joe Biden by the editorial board of the New York Times trying to determine who to endorse for their 2020 presidential candidate. And so in it, he was talking about how he interacted with Silicon Valley and how he was sort of feeling about his legacy in the White House in that regard. And so he said that one of the creeps he was meeting with at the time said that they were an artist and should be protected under copyright as such because they made games that teach you how to kill people. Now, it would certainly seem like he's paraphrasing there because I doubt any CEO would just kind of say that they do that, especially to Joe Biden, who in 2013 proposed a violent video games tax or violent media tax. So, the interview was with the New York Times reporter, and it was published to their website on January 17th of 2020. And although I didn't read the entire interview because it was nearly 50 pages in length, I read enough to understand the context of what he was saying. So, the interview spawned the article on Business Insider Ben Gilbert, which was then in turn ripped by an author named WDAY on KXNet, which appears to be a local news site for the Fargo, North Dakota area. In it, the anonymous author says, according to Business Insider, Biden called developers he met little creeps and arrogant. And from the local news site, when the word, the local news site quoted Biden as saying they were arrogant from the Business Insider article, despite it never being mentioned in the article itself. However, in the interview, the primary source, Biden did say that there was an arrogance about the Silicon Valley officials he met, with them saying that they were sort of responsible for the booming economy in the post-2008 crisis world. So the entire article that was published to the Fargo source is less than 13 collective lines of text, with the bulk of it being made up of a quote from a developer by the name of Cassidy Schnaze. And Schnaze seems to have been inactive for nearly 3.5 years. They quoted him as a video game developer, but I don't know if that's entirely accurate because it's been 3.5 years, almost 4 now, since he posted anything on his studio's blog, and he now seems to have redirected his efforts towards running his game store / community gaming area, so good for him, I suppose. Now, to call this man a game designer is essentially the same as calling me a journalist. It just doesn't seem to make sense. All I do is read other articles and kind of condense it a bit. But apparently I do put in more effort than the lads in local news by merely reading the articles I reference and properly citing sources. But I have new development, brothers. In an article published one day before Business Insider, the article by Rachel Kaiser at The Next Web references that writers at Kotaku in an article published on the 17th, 4 days before Business Insider and 3 days before The Next Web, called Unsolved Mystery, which game industry exec did Joe Biden just call a little creep? It's speculated that Biden was talking about his meeting with EA and Zynga CEOs, and to be fair, both of these companies primarily earn income, or possibly not primarily in EA's case, but a significant portion of their income comes from microtransactions, so to call them creeps is to mince words. So, this meeting that the Business Insider lad cites is pure speculation, but it's implied to be fact. And so this has sort of led to me questioning a lot of things. So the New York Times interviews the original source with just the straight facts, quotes, and excerpts straight from the donkey's mouth. Then, a day later, Kotaku article makes one aspect of the interview news and speculates on exactly who Biden was talking about, which is, I suppose, fairly reasonable for a gaming news outlet to do. Then, a few days after that, our lad Ben Gilbert pushes out his article, which seems almost like a hit piece, because I know when I saw it, it made me rather upset because I'm sort of sick of the whole video games bad situation that a lot of politicians are trying to push. So, the Gilbert article used Kotaku's take like a confirmed fact, which misled myself and possibly others who didn't want to research it further. So then, somewhere in North Dakota, they took a break from drinking their flammable water to straight up lie about the Business Insider article, along with goofy statements like, former U.S. Vice President Joe Biden recently targeted video game developers during a meeting at the White House, which is wrong on so many levels. He hasn't set foot in that building in like 3.5 years. And the interview was conducted in New York, probably at the New York Times headquarters, or wherever the Illuminati editorial board meets. So when I read that, I had to double check the date of the article I was reading to make sure it wasn't in like 2013 or something. And so they can't seem to get anything right or even correct adjacent. And they end the article, or connected series of 8 sentences, I guess, by saying, Cassidy says there are plenty of benefits that come with playing these games. And that's it. It just sort of ends. So they don't try and elaborate on what the main point, or what should be the main point of the article, which is disputing the claim that video games cause violence. Why would they not go more in-depth on that? They supposedly have this master developer, this sensei in their dojo. Why can't they just elaborate on it a bit and add some actual substance to this article instead of just nabbing a few sentences from Business Insider and calling it a day? And so now, if you all don't mind, I'm going to go above and beyond typical journalistic standards, I guess, by actually having a thesis. Please get your information from multiple sources. Try and find primary sources if they're available, because every source that isn't 100% objectively presenting information is just a funhouse mirror. And like 90% of the publications are trash. Just read other people's articles, nab a quote or two, tie their 9 lines of text together with a tweet or boomer meme, and call it a day. But then again, when I was looking at Ben Gilbert's page on Business Insider, I was shocked to find that the man puts out between 2 and 6 articles a day, so no wonder they're all drivel, probably working him like a dead horse, just beating him until he, I don't know, pumps out some article about the top 50 best games according to critics, which I'm sure is just riveting journalism. And with that, I'm going to take a break for a minute and play some jams, so, yeah, enjoy that. You are listening to the Insomniac Variety Hour, your one-stop shop for hot takes with hotter people, and what is essentially a brain stimulant that increases your IQ by over 7 figures. That's correct. We have endorsements from, I don't know, the Pharma Bro and whoever decided that vaccines cause autism, so stay tuned. But now we'll move on to the second one, Ben Shapiro Part 2, The Electric Boogaloo. And so I was thinking about it a lot. You know, why would this man with such extensive debate credentials and, you know, such refined skills choose to debate college students out of, you know, all the people that he could get onto his show or his podcast and just kind of harass for 90 minutes? And I've decided that debate has become more of a spectator sport than anything. It's like the presidential debates. None of the candidates out there on the stage are trying to actually change each other's minds or show each other a new perspective that they might not have considered. They're all just trying to showcase their beliefs and make the others look foolish so that they can rally some support. And I think that's really what Ben Shapiro does. He goes into these higher education institutes, you know, he stands up on his church stage and gets some people to yell at him. And really, when you confront someone so hostile like that, they're not going to change their mind. The person who's confronting isn't going to change their mind. But the people that are in the audience and who witness it online under the guise of like, ooh, we gotta watch these libtards be annihilated, they're the ones who might change their minds because they're not the ones who are being attacked. They're the ones who are sort of adjacent to the victim. So they might think, oh wow, that person looks real foolish and Ben Shapiro's such a, you know, debate god. I need to be like him or adopt these beliefs because, man, I don't want to get dunked on like that person. And so you sort of get to interact with people without actually interacting with them and sort of influence them without doing so directly. Because when you witness something happen, you can change your beliefs or alter your beliefs or take on a new perspective without having to let anyone know that now, compared to where you are or where you were, you've changed, because that requires some admission of being incorrect at some point. And let's face it, no one on earth ever wants to admit that they're wrong. It's the worst thing in the entire universe. It feels like getting your teeth yanked out. So, when you can influence people and make them see your point of view without actually talking to them so that they don't have to admit that they changed as a result of the things that you said, that's a very powerful influence, and, I think I cracked the case on that one. So, 500 IQ moves are being made in the radio studio tonight, so I guess that's just what happens as a result of listening to the show. So, tune in, get your friends and family, get some popcorn, go on to the websites wherever they are and spam W's in the chat. I appreciate it. And with that, it is officially 2 a.m. and time for a shout out. So you are listening to KRLX 88.1 FM, a service of Carleton College, broadcast from Northfield, Minnesota. You can listen online or chat with the DJs at krlx.org, or you can reach us in the studio at 507-222-4127. You're listening to the Insomniac Variety Hour at the downright horrible hour of 2 in the morning. So, if you're sleeping, that's like giving your brain a workout, so just leave the radio on all night and allow my sultry monotone to carry you into the dream realm, I guess. And so with that, we are going to move on to a little bit more music, and I've got a few more topics later in the evening, so, I guess, as the schedule would have it, we are in the morning, so, stay lit or go to sleep, whichever one is the most responsible from your perspective. Okay, welcome back everyone. So, my next topic is a bit heavier than the others, but I do believe it's worth talking about, so let's hop into it. It is Johnny Depp versus domestic abuser Amber Heard. Now, over the last few weeks, it became clear how domestic abuser Amber Heard's character in Aquaman was such a skilled hand-to-hand combatant. She had real-life experience beating her husband. And it disgusts me to say that people are actually defending her after audio leaked recently with such inspiring quotes as, "I fricking was hitting you. I don't know what the motion of my hand was, but you're fine. I did not hurt you. I did not punch you. I was hitting you. And you are such a baby. Grow the frick up." So, after reading that, we now know where Tommy Wiseau got his dialogue for The Room, but that's beside the point. And a debate is taking place now around whether Johnny Depp is innocent of his alleged abuse, which domestic abuser Amber Heard accused him of over the last several years, while simultaneously admitting on tape that she had committed these acts against him. Now, I'm not overly well versed in this situation, but I've been vaguely aware of it since around the time Depp filed a defamation suit against his former wife, and it just seemed like a disaster for everyone involved. From the way both parties described it, their home must have been like an MMA arena as soon as they walked through the door after a day of work. And the audio recordings have also granted more credibility to Depp's claim that Heard whipped a vodka bottle at him, which severed part of his finger, gave him MRSA 3 times, and nearly killed him. So, loving relationship there. Now, with all that out on the table, it's time for hot take number 1, I think. I don't think the tapes necessarily mean that Mr. Depp is off the hook for the allegations against him, but they absolutely incriminate domestic abuser Amber Heard, and for all we know, the instances in which Depp is accused to have hit his wife could have been him defending himself, or maybe she's totally lying about all of it and beat herself up. Now, I think the last part is incredibly unlikely, but she's lost a lot of credibility in my eyes. And she did a lot of damage to Mr. Depp's reputation and career despite taking part in the culture of violence she claimed to be a victim of, which I find despicable. It's the height of hypocrisy and she profited off of it, which is simply disgusting. Now, this incident raises a lot of questions about the way we handle abuse allegations in our culture, and it's made me reconsider a lot of things. Now, first off, should we take the guilty until proven innocent approach that the court of public opinion seems to favor? This has created a lot of conflict for me because coming out as a victim takes tremendous willpower and strength, and it's in my nature to believe people when they say they've been hurt, because the alternative is dismissing them and possibly subjecting them to greater injury by leaving them in a dangerous situation. We've seen this before on a huge scale with events like the Holocaust, and as survivor Elie Wiesel stated in his Nobel Prize speech, neutrality helps the oppressor, never the victim. Silence encourages the tormentor, never the tormented. But, on the other hand, there are some bad agents out there that are willing to take advantage of people's sympathies for their own benefit. and I think that society needs to be better, but it's hard to suggest ways to do so. Hindsight is 20/20 after all, so simply saying we should more accurately judge these scenarios knowing what we do now is foolish to say the least. Perhaps we need to appreciate the ambiguity of human interaction a bit more, and since we want to act as a jury, then we should request more proof than simple accusations, while also working to protect those who step forward as survivors while we figure out what actually happened. And I think the best way to do it is to simply be less reactionary. And it's easy to say, but often difficult to put into practice. I know that when I hear about cases of abuse or misconduct, it makes me quite upset, because most of these allegations come from or are about very wealthy, famous, and powerful people, and I find it infuriating when people so high up abuse their status and those around them. So we have to act more according to not feelings, but evidence, and that creates a whole new can of worms, because oftentimes these incidents aren't monitored or recorded or, I guess, just kept track of as competently as maybe they should, because if you live in a home where you're worried someone's going to hurt you or come home and chuck a vodka bottle at you for God's sake, then it seems that recording it would be a sort of prime objective, but from an outside perspective that might seem obvious, and when you're actually in that situation, maybe you just want to survive. So, I don't know. I'd like to leave it up to you. What are your thoughts? You know, think about it really hard, and maybe the vibes of the universe will carry it over to me. And so, the second big boy of this segment is the State of the Union address. Now, I'd like to say I thought it was a bit strange how my good friend Dongle denounced socialism so wholeheartedly, but demanded Congress spend hundreds of millions of dollars on things left and right, while simultaneously praising both military spending and tax cuts that expanded the national budget by over $100 billion from 2016 to 2017 alone. And not to mention the Congressional Budget Office estimates that the budget deficit for fiscal year 2020 will be or exceed $1 trillion. How does that even happen? To quote Donald himself, "You weren't supposed to do that." The man said he was going to drain the swamp and begin the long, messy process of cutting down our appalling national debt, but he's cranking the number higher than we've seen in years. Since the orange lad loves comparing himself to the previous administration, let's do that. When Obama came into office in 2009, the federal budget was running a deficit of nearly $1.5 trillion, which, according to the Congressional Budget Office, is reflective of the worsening economy of the time and the federal government's response. Likely a stimulus package that was put out to hopefully bring the economy back from the dead. However, during the last 3 years of Obama's presidency, the deficit averaged around $500 billion per year, which is like almost a 70% decrease. So Donald should have been able to get it even lower if he was, actually keeping his promises, but whatever. So we've seen nothing but massive increases ever since Trump took office, so that was just a lie, I guess. So what happened to clearing our debt? And maybe someone has to explain this in baby language, because the man's been in debt more times than a gambling addict in a Trump casino. But when you cut taxes, i.e. take in less money, you have to spend less money in order to avoid going into debt. That's just how economics works. This man owns so many businesses, and he says he's such a god, but how can he not even figure this out? When you get less money, you have to spend less. He's bragging about the trillions we spent on the military. It seemed like at the drop of a dime when we bombed an Afghan airport just to kill one guy and piss off Iran. Oh no, we can't say that word on the air. Oh dear. Hey, we did it, folks. Okay, so I screwed that one up. Well, 3 weeks. I thought that I would honestly last, maybe 20 minutes, but hey, we appreciate the effort, I suppose. So, don't vote Trump, vote Bernie, official candidate of the Insomniac Variety Hour. Don't report me to the FCC, and it is time for a few more jams, I suppose.